Hello, and welcome to the fourth lesson of my series Salesforce for Beginners. In this video, we are going to learn about Salesforce security model and some of the key components which are profiles, roles, and users. Feel free to check out the previous lessons and the links are in the description. So let's get started. So what is Salesforce security model? We are now aware of the Salesforce data model and how data is stored in Salesforce. To ensure the security of that data, Salesforce provides a comprehensive and flexible data security model so that we can protect our data and access to it. This can be achieved by providing security to the three different levels, which are the object level, the field level, and the record level. And this is how the data is stored in Salesforce. So providing security at these three levels ensures that our data is secure in an organization. Now let's discuss the various levels of access in Salesforce. Salesforce regulates the access to different levels to secure data and its visibility. That is, you have the various levels of access, starting with the org access or the organization level access. Here Salesforce regulates the access to the entire organization by maintaining a list of authorized users, setting their password policies, and limiting the login hours and the locations where the user can log in from. Next, Salesforce regulates the object level access by setting permissions for the users to define if a user can create, view, edit, or delete any records in that object. Next is the record level access. Here Salesforce regulates which records are visible to which users. And last but not the least, we have the field level access. This restricts the access to different fields on an object. Now that we know about the various levels of access that are in place in Salesforce, let's talk about how we can control the access to these levels using the Salesforce platform. To do so, let us take a look at this image on the screen. From a user's point of view, which is you, we first see the object level security. Object level security defines which objects are visible to the user. For example, you can see that we have three objects: candidate, position, and offer. The user is able to view candidate and position but does not have access or visibility to offer. Now this is controlled by object permissions which are present in profiles. Next, we have the field level security. Field level security defines which fields are available to the user on an object. For example, the candidate object has three fields: the first name, the last name, and the home phone. You can see that the first name and the last name is visible to the user, but the home phone is not. This is how we restrict the access or visibility of certain fields using field level security, and this is done by using field permissions. Next, we have the record level security. Now this defines that by default which records should be hidden to the user. This is controlled by organization-wide defaults. For example, if the candidate object is set to private on OWDs, then a user can only view his own records. On the other hand, we have the position object set to read only in OWDs, which means that a user can view other users' data but cannot edit or delete the other records. Now while OWDs are used to restrict or set the default values as to which user can view which record, we have a way of expanding the access to these records using the following, that is the role hierarchies, the sharing rules, and the manual sharing. And this defines what exceptions should be made so that the user can view more than what is set as default. Now that we know what Salesforce security model is, let's dive into the contents of Salesforce security model. Salesforce security model comprises of profiles and permission sets, roles, organization-wide defaults, sharing rules, and manual sharing. In this chapter, we are going to discuss about profiles and roles, and later we're going to create a user. But to get a brief idea about them, let's look at this picture. As you can see, the baseline object permissions define the baseline default settings, that is the profile and the permission sets set the permissions that a user has as to which objects and applications the user can access. On top of that, we have OWD or organization-wide defaults. Organization-wide defaults set the default restrictions that a user has. That is, if the data is public read-write, public read-only, or private. Private being the most restrictive setting, that a user is only able to view his own data and not any other user's data. While public read-write means that a user can view any other user's data and make changes to it. Next, we have the role hierarchy, sharing rules, and manual sharing, which are used to open up the access to a user, apart from the baseline object permissions and the OWD. Now let's discuss what are profiles. Profiles are what define how users access objects and data and what they can do within an application. Every user in a Salesforce organization must have a profile associated with it. So there are about two things that a profile does, which we need to keep in mind. The first is, a profile determines which applications, tabs, and objects a user can access. And the second important point is the permissions that a user has on that object, which is create, read, edit, or delete. It basically means that in an object, if a user can create a record, view the record, edit it, or delete it. So let's try to visualize this using an example. As you can see on this table, everything marked in red is a profile. For example, we have three profiles: faculty, fresher, and management. Now, taking this as a school management system application, let's take this example where we have faculty. On an object called student, faculty profile has read, write, edit, and delete. While on the fees object, faculty does not have any permissions. You can look at the fresher profile. For a student object, fresher has only read access, which means that a fresher profile user cannot write, edit, or delete the record, while the user with a faculty profile can read, write, edit, and delete that record. So this defines what a user can do in the Salesforce org on an object. So now that we know what are profiles, let's look into some of the standard profiles which are provided by Salesforce. The first is a system admin. System admin profile is given to the system administrator of the Salesforce organization. He is able to view all the data in the Salesforce org, modify all data, and also is able to customize applications. If you want to see how to create a system admin account, refer my previous chapter videos where I've created a Salesforce org. The user that we created the very first time was of the system admin profile. Next, we have the standard user. A standard user has a baseline standard functionality which is given to a standard Salesforce user. He's not the admin, so won't be able to look into all the data that is available in the Salesforce org, but the standard user will be able to view and edit records they can access and delete their own records. Similarly, we have a solution manager, we have a marketing user, a contract manager, and a read-only profile. A read-only profile is a profile which defines the access such that the records are only in the form of read-only. The user cannot make changes to the data. These profiles are out of the box and ready to use and can also be used as templates to create our own custom profiles. Alright, so now it's time to create our very first custom profile. To do so, log into your free Salesforce developer account that you created in one of the previous lessons. As you can see, I am on my Salesforce Developer Edition Home tab. On the top right corner, you will see Setup. Click on Setup. On the Setup page, scroll down. On the left side, you will see Administer. Under Administer, click on Managed Users. Now in this menu, click on Profiles. Also, to save time, you can simply write Profiles in the search area. There, click on Profiles. Now we are on the Profiles page. As you can see, there are already n number of profiles available. The 6 profiles that I explained previously are just some of the many profiles provided by Salesforce. But those 6 profiles are majorly used to replicate or to use it as a template to create new profiles. So to create a new profile, click on the New Profile button. On the Clone Profile page, select an existing profile. We are going to select the standard user. Salesforce automatically selected a user license which was available. Now let's give this profile a name. Let's call it faculty. Now click on save. Alright, you just created your very first custom profile. As you can see, most of the values which are given to this profile are based off of the standard user profile that we use to clone. So this is nothing but a clone that we are going to use. Now let's edit this profile and customize a bit. So as you can see, we have all these objects: accounts, opportunities, students, contacts, employees, project, children. So let's hide the tab projects, and to children's and parents, let's change the permissions. To do so, click on the edit button. Now you're on the profile edit page. This is used to customize the settings given to this profile. The first section is custom app settings. This defines which applications are available or are visible to the user. Next we have the tab settings. This defines which tabs are visible to the user. So to hide the tab projects, all we do is look for projects. So for that we'll scroll down to the custom tab settings. Here we have projects. We're going to select tab hidden. Next we have administrative permissions, so we'll not make any changes over there. Scroll down, we have general user permissions. These say what a user can do in Salesforce. For example, a Salesforce user can run reports, send email. We're going to scroll down. Then we have the standard object permissions. Now this is important. This defines if a user is able to read, create, edit or delete records in an object. So these are the standard objects. Let's scroll down to custom objects. As you can see that this profile does not have any permissions on parents, projects and students custom objects. So let us give this user read, create and edit permission on students, while on parents let us give this user read, create, edit and delete permission. So any user who has this profile will be able to use permissions based on this profile settings. So scroll down. You can see password policies. Now this is used to set the password policies for the profile. For example, any user who has this profile, the password expires in 90 days. So we can just change it to never expires. We have the minimum password length, which is 8, and other such policies regarding the password. So based on an organization's requirements, we can customize this part and have the user abide all these rules. Now click on save after making all the changes. That's it. All the changes are now going to reflect on the detail page of this profile. There you have it. You've created your first profile, faculty. Now that we know what are profiles, let's look into the second part of this video, which is roles. Unlike profiles, which tell us what we can do to records, that is, if we can read, write, edit or delete a record, roles define which records a user can see on an object. That is it his own records or any other records of a peer or a subordinate? As per definition, roles determine the level of access that a user has to your Salesforce org's data, and roles affect key components such as records and reports. So what does role hierarchy do? It extends the access to records that the organization-wide default has set. That is, if the organization-wide default is anything which is more restrictive than public read-write, then role hierarchy extends the access to these records based on if the role is in a higher hierarchy compared to the other roles. For example, let us look into this image. Here, in this organization, there are multiple roles at multiple levels. The top level is the executive staff, which comprises CEO, President, CFO, VP Sales, etc. Next we have the Western Sales Director, and then we have the Western Sales Rep. In the organization, having such a role hierarchy allows us to access data other than the data that we own. So a Western Sales Rep cannot look into any other data because he is on the bottom of the chain, while a Western Sales Director can look into all the data of the Western Sales Rep. Similarly, An executive staff can look into all the data which is available both of the Western Sales Director, the Western Sales Rep, and any other in this chain. This basically allows executive staff role to access all the data which is not just their own but of different users based on where they stand on the role hierarchy. Please note that we're going to learn about OWDs in the next lesson. So now, let's go create our very first custom role. Now log into your Salesforce developer account. I'm currently on my home page on my Salesforce org. In the top right corner, click on Setup. Now on the Setup page, scroll down. Under Administer, click on Manage Users. Scroll down, you have Roles, or simply type Roles in the search quick find. There, click on Roles. Now you'll see that example which I just showed you. Just go through this. Next, click on Setup Roles. Now what you see here is the role hierarchy of your organization. Begin IT is my organization, and then there is CEO, which is a role. I can add a role under CEO. So to do that, you can click on Add Role, or you can add a role above CEO. So anywhere on the tree, you can create or add a role. You can just expand this to see if there are any other branches, and you can decide where you want to add a role. So currently I'm going to add a role under SVP Sales and Marketing. On clicking Add Role, you will be redirected to New Role page. Enter the name of the role. I'm going to type Associate. Now when you click outside, the role name is going to be Associate. The role reports to SVP Sales and Marketing role. It basically means that Associate is a subordinate to SVP. Now you write the role name you want on reports. I'll just write Associate again. Now click on Save. There, you've just created your very first role, which is Associate. Now under Administer and under Manage Users, let's go back to roles again to see where in the tree is Associate role. Click on Setup Roles. Scroll down. Expand SVP Sales and Marketing. There, you can see Associate is now a subordinate to SVP along with VP International Sales, VP Marketing, and VP North America. Now this may seem that Associate doesn't fit over here, but this is just to show you an example as to how you can add a role. In a real organization, you have to make sure that the client or the organization gives you all the specifications as to where a role is going to lie. Now that we know how to create profiles and roles, let's try to visualize this using an example. So let's take an example of a school. You can see that there is a hierarchy right in front of us. These are all the staff members. So every user here is a staff member of the school. On the very top, we have Mrs. Owner. Everything in yellow is the role and everything in red is the profile. So the owner has a role called Owner and also a profile called Owner. Moving a step down, we have Mr. Principal and Mr. Trustee. According to the role hierarchy, they are on the same level, which means that Mr. Principal will not be able to see any data of Mr. Trustee because they are on the same level. But Mr. Principal will be able to see all the data of Mr. Professor, who is one level below Mr. Principal. Now these are defined by the roles. Similarly, Mr. Intern and Ms. Lab Assistant, their data will be visible to Mr. Professor because of their role being one step below Mr. Professor's role. Now, you can see that Mr. Principal and Mr. Professor have the same profile. This would mean that Mr. Principal and Mr. Professor both will be able to do the same things on an object. The permissions that they have on an object, which is read, write, create, or edit, would be similar, while Mr. Professor and Mr. Intern have different profiles, which is fresher and faculty. So anything that a fresher has on his profile, those permissions will not be the same as Mr. Professor, as a professor can maybe have read, write, and edit, while a Mr. Intern might only have read access to it. So this is how profiles and roles play in an organization. So now that we have an understanding about profiles and roles, let's create a user in our Salesforce organization and associate a profile and a role to that user. To do so, log into your Salesforce developer account. In your Salesforce org, go to the top right corner, click on Setup. On the Setup page, scroll down to Administer and click on Manage Users. Now from the list, click on Users, or simply type Users in the quick find. Now click on Users. In All Users page, you can see all the users that are in your Salesforce org, and the active column denotes if the user is active or is in a deactivated state. Click on New User. So now let's fill all the details required to create a user. First, we need the first name. So let's just take sample. Last name can be user. Alias is automatically generated. You can customize that if needed. Let's give in an email ID. Next, we need a username. So just click outside and there we have our username and nickname. Let's skip these fields as they are not mandatory. So we'll skip that for now. Now, we're going to associate a role that we just created. So I'm going to pick associate, which is a custom role. Let's change the user license to take Salesforce. Change the profile to again a custom profile that we just created, which was faculty. Now scroll down. Let's skip the mailing address. Let's skip single sign-on. In locale settings, this determines the settings based on your location and the language that you want. In the approval settings, however, we determine if we are an approver, if this user is going to be an approver, then if we are supposed to get an email every time there is an approval process. So let's just select if I'm an approver or a delegate approver. Now let's click on save. There, we've just created our very first user, whose name is sample user. I'm currently logged in as a system administrator and I have created this user. So it is not that this user is currently logged into the system. So to log in as a sample user that we just created, we have to first set a password for this user. So if I were this user, I would first go to my email ID. In my email ID, I just received a mail from support@salesforce.com, which is basically used to verify my account. So I'm going to verify my account real quick. Click on verify account. When a new tab opens, you create a new password for this account. Now this password has to be as per the specifications that has been provided to the profile. So I'm just going to give a new password. Now select a security question from the list and put in the answer before you click on change password. Once you click on save password, it is going to let you log into your Salesforce account. So I am in my Salesforce account as the new user, and the very first time it logs me in into the Lightning experience. So to switch to classic experience, which we'll be using mostly, click on the top right corner under view profile, click on switch to Salesforce Classic. Here we are in the classic environment. Now in the top right applications drop down, click on school management. You can see that the projects tab is not available here on the tab section, and there you have it. We've just created a very first user. So that's it for today's video. If you like the video, press on that like button, comment and share the video, and subscribe to my channel Begin IT. Also like us on Facebook and visit our blog on WordPress. So this is Devjit Chaudhary, and I'll see you next time.